Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing another color grading tutorial on how to edit like the artists Jon Olsson and Janni. If you know who they are, you're going to know they have an epic style. So we're going to be going through their photos, we're going to be analysing exactly what they do with their edits and how we can do that ourselves. And I'm going to show you two examples of what the edits look like afterwards in just a minute. But before we do, I want to let you know we have a $10,000 worth giveaway coming up. If you want to enter that, just click the top link in the description. All we need to do is to just sign up with your email and we will let you know if you win. So when you sign up, make sure you use the email that you use to log into your Instagram, your Facebook, it's just a Gmail, or your YouTube. As long as we can contact you at that email if you win, that's all you need to do. Just follow the link, you'll see all the details. You can win a DJI Phantom $1,000 worth on Amazon, all of our presets, all of our courses. And one other thing I want to mention is if you want to go ahead and grab our Lightroom course, that's beginner to professional course, go ahead, that link is also in the description. You can go ahead, grab that now for a massive discount. It's about 98% off at the moment, so go ahead and check that link out as well. Okay, so this is my Instagram. I'm just going to search now for Jon Olsson. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram as well if you want to as well. So this is the artist Jon Olsson we're going to be focusing on today, and we're going to be going for his sort of beach vibe, highly saturated orange and teal color grade. So he has actually, his style is very sort of different throughout. He has lots of saturated blues. He has quite soft photos. He has, if you look here in this photo, he has like some fade in the highlights and some fade in the shadows. I'm going to tell you how he does that as well. But the main thing we can take from his color grades are, a lot of the time, his blues or his aquas are incredibly saturated and poppy. And actually, if you look at his feed, he does have this orange and teal color grade style. Now, some of the other ones, like this one for example, are slightly different to the style we're doing today. So if you want to see a video on this specific style, just drop a comment down below and I will do that one soon. But we're going to be focusing on some of these styles here. So we're going to be focusing on this kind of style here, the orange and teal part. So this is the style we're going to be trying to mimic today. It's a very specific orange and teal color grade, and it has some different tweaks and edits in there which you're going to find out now. So this is one of the photos. You can see we've just gone from that to that, an incredibly vibrant orange and teal color grade. So we're going to take the edit from here to here, and it's going to kind of look something similar to this color grade right here. So I'm just going to reset this image, and I'm going to take you through step by step what we need to do. So first of all, we're going to scroll up and we're going to start on the basics panel, and we're just going to work our way through. So first thing we're going to do on this is we're actually going to increase the exposure to about 1.75. I've done this edit earlier just so I know exactly the numbers we need to be using. So if you are wondering, you don't need to use these exact numbers, just kind of follow along roughly with what we're doing. So we're just going to increase the exposure, mainly because the photo is incredibly dark. So we're just going to boost that up in the exposure setting there. Then we're going to get the shadows, we're just going to boost those up to +100, and actually we're going to drop the highlights to -100. We want to save as much detail as we can in this image. So this may be different for you. Your image may not have captured so much from the shadows or so much from the highlights. So just drop it to or raise it to the point that you think is acceptable. You want to basically sort out the exposure of the image to start off. Okay, so now I've done that, the next thing to work on is the white balance. And there was a nice fine order to this, and if you want to learn this in a lot more detail, just go ahead and check out our course. That is on 98% off at the moment. The link is also below the giveaway link in the description. But we're going to drop the color of this image, the color temperature, to about 4,900. And that's just going to make it a little bit more blue, so we can then work on those blues a little bit later to get that more tropical look that we're aiming to get. Now, I personally think this image is too purple, so we're going to go for -15 in the tints, just to kind of counteract that purple magenta look that we've got going on that we don't really want in this image. So the next thing is, if you look at his photos, you look at this photo of Janni, it's a very contrasty photo. And even there, that's not the best example. You can look at this one where we're kind of going for the really saturated teals, those really contrasty colors. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the white slider, and we're going to introduce some more whites, boost those up to +30, get the blacks, we're going to really crush those blacks, and I'm thinking -30 to here just to kind of make it a little bit more contrasty. Now, we're not going to touch the contrast slider for the time being. We're going to work on the contrast a little bit more in the tone curve at the end of the video. So if you are interested in that, just stay until the end and I'll tell you how to do that at the end. Next thing we're going to do is just boost the clarity to about +50%, and that's going to add a little bit of this sort of very harsh, sharpening contrast on the skin. So that is it for the basics panel. So we're going to come back to the tone curve in just a minute at the end of the video, like I said. So now we're going to work on the HSL sliders. This is basically going to change the hue, the saturation, and the luminance of each individual color. If you want to know what that is, basically the hue is just the type of color, so you can make greens more orange, you can make blues more teal. The saturations is obviously the saturation or vibrance, I guess, of that color, and the luminance is the brightness of that color. So we're just going to work through, and we're going to try and get that teal and orange color grade to start off with in the HSL side. So we're going to go for a +7 in the reds and a -1 in the oranges. The reason we're not changing these ones too much is we want to keep the skin tones roughly neutral. We don't want to be playing about with those too much. Seeing as this is a portrait photo, you can mess around with it more if it's a landscape photo, but because it's a portrait photo, if you mess around with these too much, you can find, for example, if I drag it all the way up, the skin can actually look a little bit weird, so slightly too pink. So we're not going to do that today. We're just going to leave it roughly about +7, -1. Now, as for the yellows, boost those yellows to about +40, and the greens, we're going to drop those greens to about -35. Now, in our Lightroom course, I do explain in more detail why we do these edits and how we know to do this and why we move hues in different directions. So if you want to know more about that, like I said, the course is available at 98% off currently. But without wanting to dig that one too much, we're going to introduce some more aquas here. And this is one thing I like to try. If I'm going to go for a teal and orange color grade, I like to actually make the aquas a little bit more on the blue side. So when I drop the blues to make the aquas, or the teal look, I don't actually make it too teal. You'll see what I mean now when I show you. So if I go +7 in the aquas, actually if I just boost it 100%, you can see what I mean. All the way to the right kind of makes it slightly more magenta. If I drag it all the way to the left, you get that aqua look that we were talking about earlier. So we're going to boost that up to about 10 in the aquas. But then in the blues, because we've got this really harsh aqua going on in this, we've got this really harsh teal going on in this color grade, we're actually going to get the blues and we're going to drop that down to -5, just to get a little bit more of that teal look that I mentioned earlier. As for the purples and magentas, you can leave those alone. There's not really much going on in this image in terms of purples and magentas, so we're just going to leave those there. Okay, saturation, we're actually going to make the reds a little bit less saturated, so -28 here. We're going to go for the oranges, and we're actually going to boost those because we want to get that really saturated skin tone that you have here, going on here, you have going on in this image here. You don't have particularly desaturated skin tones, so we're going to boost those up with the orange slider to +10. We're going to get the yellows and boost those to 5 and the greens to about 10 as well. Now that's not really too much of a color grade. The main difference comes in with the blues because there is so much blue in this image, and that will obviously depend a lot on your image, which is why it kind of takes a while to learn exactly how to make a whole featured like presets of this one specific style. We do actually sell style presets, the tropical style presets, which is kind of replicating Jon Olsson's style. If you are interested as well, that's on our website. I'll leave that link down below as well if you want to go check that out as well. But now we're going to move on to the aquas. And like I said earlier, aquas is the sort of the one you want to be messing around with. You want to leave the blues kind of very close to the middle if you can, because the blues are the majority of a lot of the images. If you play around with the blues too much, you can end up ruining the entire image. If you play around with the aquas, however, I like to call this like my secret hidden tip, really. If you play around with the aquas, you do change the blues in the image, but it's a much more subtle change, and it actually kind of creates a much nicer final image. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to get the aqua slider and we're going to boost the aqua slider to +40, and then we're going to get the blue slider and we're going to drop the blue slider to -17. Now this may seem kind of counterintuitive, but you'll see why when we get a little bit later when I show you the camera calibration. For the purples, we're just going to drop the purples, but it doesn't really make any difference because there aren't really many purples in this image. Right, next thing we're going to work on the luminance. Now, the last time I filmed this video was about a year and a half ago, and I had lots of comments asking how we get this dark sort of brown Janni style skin. Well, partly go out in the sun a lot will probably help an awful lot, but also you can kind of replicate it in Lightroom as well. And I'm going to show you how you do that now. So we're going to get the reds and we're just going to drop the luminance of the reds, just whack it down to -75, -80. You don't want to go too far that you can make the skin look a little bit blotchy, but enough to actually darken down those colours. Do the same with the oranges, but in this case, if you go all the way to the bottom, you can basically just completely change everything and make it look kind of satin and matte. So you see what I mean? The darker you go, the more darker the skin tone is. You don't want to go complete to the bottom, otherwise you lose those highlights on the skin, it just looks fake. So it depends where you want to go for. I'm thinking for this photo, I actually left it at about -20, but you could, if you wanted to, just go to like -50, -40, just to kind of get a little bit more extreme. Now for the yellows, I'm actually going to boost the yellows to +11. That's because if there's any yellows in the skin tones, I want to brighten up those, just sort of like slight highlights in the skin to make it a little bit more realistic if I'm taking the brightness down in the reds and the oranges. Now for the aquas and the blues, if you check back at this image here, he actually has dark blues and dark aquas. Nothing's too bright here, and you can achieve that through contrast, but you can also achieve that through luminance. So we're going to drop the luminance to about -20 and the blues also to about -20, -30. Somewhere around -25 is probably a good safe bet. We can always come back and change it in a bit. Right, the next thing we're going to work on is the split toning. Split Split toning is a very subtle edit, and if you press Option or Alt on your keyboard and you drag the slider along, you can see the color you're going to add. So we're going to add 360 in the highlights, and we're just going to put about 5% saturation on, just to kind of warm up those highlights a little bit away from the blues and teals that we were talking about earlier. And for the shadows, we're going to go for the same 360, and we're just going to put about 3 into the shadows as well. Split toning, I get a lot of questions asking, why do I even bother with split toning? You don't really need to if you don't want to. Split toning can be used in 2 ways. 1 for very subtle changes, or 2 just for some very dramatic looks. In this case, we're just using it very subtly. Next thing, detail. I'm going to put some noise reduction on this image just because he has very soft images. So you look here, this one's actually a little bit of a different one. It's slightly sharper, but if you just look through his theme, this one for example, is incredibly soft. And actually, if you want to know how to edit like this, you basically do the exact same edit that I'm doing, but instead of boosting the saturation in the blues and the oranges, you just desaturate the blues and the oranges, but it's a base color grade of orange and teal with a slight bit of magenta in the tint earlier. But that's not the color grade we're doing at the moment. This is this one we're doing. So we're actually going to just sort of take a little bit noise reduction up. Now we're going to move on to the best part, which is camera calibration. Camera calibration is where you're going to take this image from this point, which is like fairly good. If I show you the before and the after, we've already made it kind of a little bit more interesting. This is kind of a nice pastel kind of look, but you can take it from here to that nice tropical style look very simply just by getting your red primary. We're going to boost the red primary to 60%. We're going to get the blue primary and we're going to reduce it to minus 80%. And there you have it. You already have your massive teal and orange color grade. Now we're not done yet. Lots of people will leave it here, which you could do. This is kind of like that kind of teal and orange color grade we were talking about earlier, and it's fairly close to the final edit, although there are a few more things we can do. With this one, it's a little bit harder to replicate this exact teal and orange because he's got these really white highlights in the swimming pool. But we're going to try our best, and I'm going to show you how you do that. Now, to get those sort of highlights there, you can actually desaturate the aquas, and you just boost the luminance. So you come to the aquas and just boost the luminance like this, and just desaturate the aquas a bit if you wanted to, maybe the blues. But I'm just going to kind of leave the saturation of the aquas positive. In fact, I might actually just boost the luminance of the aquas. But other than that, that's what we're going to work in for now. Okay, so that is the camera calibration. Now we're going to come up and I'm going to add a little bit more contrast. So plus 23 for the contrast. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to get rid of that because we haven't done the tone curve yet. Like I said, wait till the end for the tone curve. Tone curve is basically an S curve. Now the tone curve is basically an S curve, but it's also very slightly different. So you'll see what I mean now. We're going to introduce some boosting in the highlights, drop some in the shadows, but not too far. If you're not on this one, just click this button down here and you'll get this point curve here. Drop the shadows, and already we get this cool contrast going on. We're going to just drag another point here, lift it up a bit just to add a slight tiny bit of fade in his images. Like I mentioned right at the beginning of this video, he does have some slight fade, so we're going to just boost that up a little bit, just add some fade, and then to really kind of bring in those crushed blacks, we're going to drop the bottom of the curve here. Something like this is going to look really quite cool, and already this color grade is really beginning to stand out. If I just show you the before and the after, we're beginning to get an incredible look. You're really getting that nice contrast in the shadows and very soft highlights with what we've done up here. Now you can take it a step further and just boost up the highlights a little bit more, make it a little bit brighter, and then actually sometimes it can be interesting just to drop it off a little bit here, add a little bit of fade to the highlights as well. Depends what kind of look you're going for. You can bring this out a little bit more to the left, just play around a little bit and just see kind of what colors you're going for. If you want it a little bit darker in your midtones, a little bit brighter in your midtones. And you can see how we took it from an S curve, very simple S curve, to something that's a lot more different. You have that contrast still with a little bit of fade, a little bit of kind of like negativeness going on. You know what like a negative is, something like that, where you kind of have this weird flip going on in the graph, is a kind of cool way of getting a nice effective look. And that's basically it for the color grade. One thing I'm going to do now is just use the gradient filter. And if you look at his image, specifically this one here, where he's kind of like a sort of vignette, if you look at this image here as well, he has darker here and darker here. I'll show you how you can do that effect now. So you drag this slider up like this. You're going to reset it by double clicking on effect and just drop the exposure here, maybe just lift up the shadows a little bit and drop the highlights. You could drop the saturation or boost saturation depending on what you want, but that's just going to make it a little bit darker. Do the exact same in the highlights, drop it, and we're just going to drop the saturation in the highlights as well. Make it a little bit darker like that. There you have it. That's basically the look we were going for. If I show you the before and the after, you can see the crazy sort of difference this makes if you really spend a lot of time on the tone curve and that camera calibration, how much of a difference it can make. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Like I said at the beginning, don't forget to enter our $10,000 giveaway. Just click the top link in the description, and also if you want to go ahead and buy our Lightroom course at 98% off, go ahead and click that link as well. That will be in the description. We're also selling presets that we kind of take a tropical vibe that is inspired by Jon Olsson. If you want to grab that link will also be in the description if I remember to put it all in. So I'll see you in the next video, guys. Live long and prosper.